Hey guys, this is the 2017 September-October topic analysis for critical affirmatives, in which we're going to look at different ways that you can write your Affs from a critical perspective to get critical offense. So at first glance, this topic seems to be pretty bad in terms of K ground for the affirmative, mainly because of the word compulsory. A lot of critical authors disagree with forcing citizens to work for the government in a variety of ways. But there are a bunch of different interpretations of the topic we can take, or different ways of affirming that allow us to gain critical offense. Unfortunately, the wording of this topic means that a lot of high theory positions will not affirm the topic. In which case, if you would want to read a position like psychoanalysis or Deleuze, you would probably be very not topical. The first way that you can get critical offense is via a soft left kind of consequentialist AF, which is an AF that gains consequentialist offense with some type of structural violence framing, or framing that critiques militarism or neoliberalism or anything along those lines. It would gain offense either by defending the whole resolution and getting advantages from the whole resolution, or via a specific policy implementation of the resolution. There are different ways you can interpret the resolution to get different plans. The first word that can be interpreted in different ways is the word national service. So the word national service has a variety of different meanings in different literature bases. It could mean conscription or compulsory military service, and it could also mean something like programs that force young people to work in places like the Peace Corps. There are also a variety of ways that you can spec on this topic. One potential way is specifying a group of people for whom national service ought to be compulsory, which allows you to either get more moderate critical Affs or more radical critical Affs, like specifying only for white people. Another a phrase in the resolution that can be interpreted in a couple of different ways is the phrase "in the United States," which could mean that national service can only be within the borders of the United States, which allows you to get out of troop deployment. So the first plan that we can talk about is the military conscription plan. So military conscription is a plan that advocates that the U.S. government would reinstate the draft, which is the U.S. government, when it needs to recruit soldiers, it can, out of a lottery, pick any civilian it wants to who is qualified. The one main impact that this AF has is an adventurism impact. Adventurism is the ability or the ability for Congress or any individual to experiment or feel free to kind of be reckless in military service. So, for example, if Congress feels like they have the free rein to justify war, and there were no constraints, that's an instance of adventurism. The argument for this AF under military conscription would be that if all people are forced to enter the military, i.e. the draft, Congress will be a lot more cautious in engaging in war. i.e. Congress is going to have to question a lot of the wars that we engage in instead of just kind of going into war blindly. If this is true, that accesses a lot of big scale impacts like militarism and neoliberalism, because we're less likely to recklessly go to war. Another internal link is that if we have a draft, it will cause protests, which will also lead to less wars. Empirically proven by the war in Vietnam, which led to a lot of anti-draft and anti-war protests, and eventually led to us pulling out of Vietnam. There were a couple of other impacts to the military conscription AF. There is a lot of literature that exists that says current volunteer recruitment practices coerce minoritarian communities into entering the army. For example, current AVF practices coerce illegal immigrants into the military by incentivizing them to get access to citizenship. Another way is that if the military often focuses recruitment on low-income communities and communities of color to incentivize them to join the war. And that creates an unequal distribution of people fighting the war because it's disproportionately low income and people of color. The Conscription Act would solve this because it would say that because it is random and it is a lottery, people would have to proportionately go to war and fight in the war, which would lead to more equality within the military and more social unity. So this is an egalitarianism argument, i.e., if we conscript people into the military, it will become more representative of society. The current military is currently composed of a lot of low income, low educated, and racial and economic minorities, so conscription would allow a more proportionate military. It would also create social cohesion because it would serve as a melting pot for social groups, i.e. social groups would have to interact with others that they would not necessarily interact with had they not been recruited for the military. So that is an independent net benefit to this type of act. Another internal link and impact that this kind of act can garner is a neoliberalism type of impact, i.e. the argument would be that the military is currently becoming very privatized and very individualistic, and resources are allocated in recruiting low-income and minority students. The military conscription would solve this back because it would lead to a larger amount of recruits and less privatization of the military. Another internal link to neoliberalism for this type of act is the argument that after the United States transitioned to becoming an all-volunteer force, i.e. they no longer have the draft, the U.S. Army began to market itself via a lot of consumer research and ad campaigns associated with neoliberalism, i.e. they portrayed military services in terms of a very largely individualized choice and individual opportunity, which a lot of anti-neoliberal authors critique, i.e. individualism. Military conscription would resolve a lot of this because it defocuses recruitment efforts on individual choices and focuses more on larger structures, as well as no longer targeting specific low-income or minoritarian communities. Another main type of plan act that one could defend to get critical benefits or defining national service as something that is more volunteer-related, not conscription-related. So the difference between this act and the other, and the act we just talked about, would be that it's no longer about the United States drafting people into the military, but rather the U.S. creating a policy in which individuals are forced to volunteer for a certain amount of time for one of the many service organizations. So there were a couple of main service organizations that you should be familiar with, and you could write your app around. The first is Learn and Serve America, which was under the Corporation for National and Community Service, which was a federal program. It provided grants to elementary, middle school, and high school and higher education institutions for students to participate in service learning projects and community service. The Peace Corps is a government-run volunteer program in which citizens go abroad for a period of 2 years to work at nonprofit and non-government organizations with the purpose of having American citizens learn more and give back to other cultures. The third type of volunteer organization is called AmeriCorps, which is a volunteer program also under the Corporation for National and Community Service, in which adults in America work in American nonprofit community organizations. So it's often called the domestic Peace Corps. A big advantage of this type of app is that you get a lot of access to grassroots movement impact, i.e. you incentivize people to engage in civil society from the bottom up instead of the top down, which means you get access to grassroots movements, i.e. individuals working within their community to build it up instead of government policies enforcing things. This interacts really well with a lot of negative critiques because it allows you to get access to framing that is like, we need to have grassroots movements to engage in the alternative. Another independent net benefit to this type of app is that it forces people to encounter the other, i.e. whatever other that is, whether it's racialized minorities or people, less privileged people, or economic minorities. More privileged people are forced to encounter and interact with communities that they do not normally have to interact with, which can lead to a variety of impacts under different framing mechanisms. Another type of way to affirm this topic is having more radical affs. So instead of gaining offense via something like defending a plan and gaining post-fiat offense, you would defend either semi-topical or non-topical interpretation of the resolution, in which you gain a discursive or performative method or offense via a performative method that affirms the topic in some metaphorical way. There was a lot of literature about how current military recruitment practices are rooted in masculine and able-bodied norms of the ideal soldiers, i.e., a soldier is seen as this ideal male specimen that is able-bodied and masculine and straight, which excludes lots of other bodies who do not fit in that mold. There's also a lot of interesting literature on disability in particular, i.e., there were two types, i.e., disability is seen as a failure to perform one's civic or national duty, and that also translates to things like queerness or femininity. If you do not fit in the mold of the ideal soldier, you are kind of excluded from this paradigm of patriotism or civic duty. This also creates two forms of disability. There's a distinction between tragically disabled soldiers who are disabled within war or when they're in combat, and deformed. So there's a lot of disability literature on this, which says that there were these two types of disability. One is in which one is trying to serve their country, and it is kind of seen as a noble kind of disability, in which the veteran is still able to preserve patriotic values and masculinity. While the second type of disability, the deformed type of disability, is a kind of failure on that body's parts. It says that they are kind of seen as queer, or they are fail to live up to the patriotic value of productivity and patriotism. So you can affirm this resolution through a couple of ways that disrupts the paradigm of this ideal soldier, i.e., refusing the recruiting purposes, the kind of depiction of the ideal soldier is a way to refuse this paradigm. This also instantiates itself in a lot of literature via the idea of masculinity. A lot of volunteer recruitment efforts reproduce masculine norms, i.e., women are tried to be incorporated into the military based on this justification that they will enter into temporary masculinity, which creates a lot of violence, i.e., women are seen as masculine when they serve the war, but only for a temporary period of time, i.e., when the men came home, women would go back into the house. This also created a new definition of manhood, which was mainly seen in like World War I and World War II, in which men were expected to go off to war, and if they were not able to, or they did not, then they were seen as a failure on the failure in terms of masculinity. So the way that this could work in terms of an affirmative is that you could gain offense. You could do this analysis of the way that our discussions about militarism and volunteering for military service operates, and then deconstruct this via some discursive or performative method. So these things could include things like rage, via a bunch of different identity politics, via kind of an affective refusal of this. You can also do different performative methods like poetry or hip-hop, or affirming the resolution as a metaphor of disrupting this figure. Any type of performative method is a way that can be tied to disrupting this. There was also a lot of arguments to be had about including kind of minoritarian subjects into the discussion of militarism and military, i.e., there was a lot of literature that exists about the perspective of queer women, for example, in the military, or people of color in the military, and their experience in the military in kind of this spatial and temporal region of like the battlefield and how that exists for them, i.e., how masculinity and femininity represent themselves on the battlefield, or in terms of national service, which is a way, and that can be incorporated into the affirmative on this topic in the form of a narrative method, or any discursive strategy that tries to articulate the resolution in a more material kind of expressive way, in which we have to think about the way that the military operates on different bodies as a way to kind of affirm the resolution. So lastly, there were a couple of things that you should be thinking about when you're trying to figure out what type of aff you want to read. The first question to ask is, how far left should your aff be? This question means, how moderate versus left do you want your advocacy to be? So moderate would be something that defends the U.S. government and says that the military conscription is good, or grassroots movements are good, and defends like the state, and just read some structural violence or militarism type arguments. This might be less strategic against debaters in which you think they're going to go hard for a critique, because it's hard to defend things like military conscriptions against more radical critiques, i.e., why should we include more minoritarian subjects into the military if they win that the state is bad? So in that instance, it might be more strategic to think more left, i.e., kind of more discursive or more performative type of offense. There's also the question of when you're writing a critical aff, how should you go about dealing with the compulsory part of the resolution? It's possible to defend it straight up, i.e., defending military conscription, which would work out best with structural violence or consequentialist framing, because there are ways to get critical net benefits, like we talked about. Or you could defend a looser interpretation of the resolution, and get offense via performative methods to try to avoid that part of the debate, because then that debate would come down to T implementation or T policymaking.